This is the Business Storytelling Podcast with Christoph Trapp, available on Google, Spotify, Apple, Pandora, and other podcast channels. Want to play it on your iPhone? Just ask Siri to play the Christoph Trapp Business Storytelling Podcast, also available on Alexa. Here's Christoph with today's episode.
Hey everyone, Christoph Trapp here. Thanks for joining me. Another live stream. Everything seems to be working. Amazon, YouTube, LinkedIn, Twitter. And we want to talk about social media in government. Specifically, I ran across him, I don't know how long ago, a couple of years, I don't know when. Rob Sand, he's the auditor of the state of Iowa. I'm in Iowa, in case you didn't know. This is where I sit for the last 10 months, never leaving to go anywhere anymore. So that's kind of the new reality of things, fortunately or unfortunately, I guess. But I ran across him, I think at the latest when we had an inland hurricane. And all you meteorologists listening, screaming at me, that's not what it's called. That's exactly what it is. Even if that's not the official term, it was a mess. And he packed up his chainsaw, drove over to Cedar Rapids, I believe, shared pictures, shared his experience, and helped people. So fantastic social media engagement. Let's get him out of the green room here, make sure he is unmuted, and we can have a conversation. Rob, how's it going today?
I'm good. How are you, Christoph?
Living the dream, so to speak. But, ton of snow. You guys probably too in Des Moines, right?
Yep. Yeah, we got actually record. I think it broke a 126-year record. Somebody could audit me on that, but it was a lot. It was a record, and it was a lot.
Somebody can argue on that. That's funny. Certainly we have you tagged on Twitter, on the Twitter version of this live stream, and your Twitter handle is on all the other networks as well. People can follow you there and check you out, 26,000 followers or whatever. But talk to me about what's your strategy on Twitter. Why are you so involved? I mean, you have fantastic discussions. I see you go on there sometimes and I go and ask me anything. And of course, thank you, Twitter. We have some of those, jerk faces out there who say something stupid, but you always got something nice back to say or something relevant. You're not just a jerk back feeding the troll. So what's happening?
Look, I think there's a lot of things happening. Number one, I'm a human being, and I'm not afraid to be a human being to other human beings. And I work in a world with extremely low expectations, a sector of our world with extremely low expectations, being someone who's in elected office. I myself have very low expectations for people like me. But we should have higher expectations. We should look at people who are in elected office, and we should want to see them trying to work together. We should see them disagreeing when it matters, but putting differences and personal issues aside to be serving the public. The biggest thing I think, honestly, is I say what I think, and I have a sense of humor, dry as it may be sometimes, but I engage with people. I'm not afraid to be a person. I will tell you what I think about Taylor Swift, which is frankly, I realize many people have strong opinions about her. I don't, which in itself is controversial to some people. How can I not either absolutely love her or detest her? I'm just kind of shrug. But the fact that I'm willing to talk about that as an elected official, I think makes a difference to people. They're accustomed to seeing elected officials who are terrified of saying anything publicly, terrified, because the only thing they seem to care about is manufacturing some kind of a persona or manufacturing some kind of an image that can slice and dice people just right to lead to greater support. I can't stand that crap. I want to be an elected official that just is doing what I think is the right thing. And I'm not scared to be myself. I'm not scared to do the right thing. Sometimes people are going to agree with it. Sometimes they aren't. I tend to think that I'm fairly normal, and so that most of the time, most of the people will agree with it. And so that I think that I can do that and still be successful in this. I've only run once, and I won that race. So I guess time will tell if it works again.
Yeah, and I mean, being human, that's kind of really what social media is about, quite frankly. And what's interesting, I was just talking about that whole thing about low expectations, not even related to government, as you just mentioned it, but customer service. The expectation of customer service in some industries is so low that if you do anything good, all of a sudden you're a rock star, but you didn't really do much. So we do have, guys, when you ask questions on these chats, let's stay on topic. All right. One question is, what office are you in? I assume we're talking about Rob's office as state auditor.
That's right.
How did you get him? So I remember your name, and I think I'm remembering this correctly. I read it in the New York Times or their Sunday podcast or whatever it was. The Iowa lottery case, right? You were like a prosecutor,
right? Yeah. So quick background on me. I grew up in Decorah, Iowa, which is in the northeast part of the state. It's a county seat. It's about 8,000 people. You got to drive an hour to get anywhere bigger. I went to college out in Rhode Island at Brown University. It was fun to see the East Coast, but the best thing about it was I actually learned a lot about the Midwest by leaving it because it gave me something to compare it to. In part because of that, I came back, went to the University of Iowa for law school on a full scholarship, and then went to the Attorney General's office after that. So I spent about 7 years there, prosecuting mostly financial crime and public corruption, mix of other things in there as well. And one of those big cases turned out to be the largest lottery rigging scheme in American history. It was not that when the case was handed to me. When it was handed to me, it was kind of a dead end, sort of like a cleanup job that no one else in the office, and no one else, I didn't want it either. Nobody wanted it. But as it turns out, we kept pulling that thread on that sweater, and the whole thing unraveled. Millions of dollars of rigged jackpots across 5 different states ended up getting written up in the New York Times Magazine, and then that story got read into the Daily, got coverage all around the country, just because it's a crazy story. I mean, it was an interesting investigation and quite a crime, but the story itself too, it involves Bigfoot hunters. If you're watching this right now, it's my pinned tweet on Twitter. So it's quite a story. But through that 7 years at the Attorney General's office, it really kind of hit the point where I was tired of just getting up every day and thinking about the worst things that people can do to each other, which is what criminal prosecution is. I'm someone that tends to be an optimist, tends to be happy. And my work was changing that. And so I had worked with the auditor's office because they conduct most of the public corruption investigations in Iowa. So I knew people there. I knew the work they did. I knew what I loved about the people there. I knew what I would change about some of the ways the office worked. And when I started thinking about finding something new to do where I could really have more of a positive impact instead of just mitigating bad things, that was towards the top of my list. So I did office, realized that it could have a much bigger role than it currently took in promoting efficiency in government, and said, there you go. There's something I would be excited to do. I can get up every day to be efficient. So here I am, having fun.
Fantastic. And certainly, I mean, you're very, very human. What's interesting too, Rob, is, I mean, I'm wearing my new T-shirt, as you can see from my new book, has my own picture on it. And you're in a T-shirt as well. And what's interesting about that, I can see many politicians if they come on the show and they would be like, oh, hold on, I got to put on a tie, I got to do whatever, I got to put on a jacket, I got to look a certain way. And honestly, I don't know if people care anymore on these shows. I mean, I wear T-shirts. Sometimes I wear a stocking hat. In fact, I got one line right over there. Yeah. I think just like dressing like a person also adds to that humanness factor.
I if I can say so, and I think my dad will agree. I come from at least a medium length line, maybe not a long line, but at least a medium length line of what you might call educated rednecks. My dad also hates formality and also hates formal dressing. He's a family practice doctor, but he brought me up fishing and hunting, so that's where I got my love of the outdoors. Him, if you saw his There's a few stray items scattered in the lawn that might make you. But when he started practicing medicine, he was from Decorah and moved back. He didn't put a tie on, and the practice at the time was everybody wears a tie. And one of the other doctors would sort of needle him about it. Oh, Mr. Casual, no tie today. Mr. Casual, still no tie. And my dad would always just say, "Yep, no tie." And you know what? People are actually just fine with having a doctor that didn't want to put a tie on, as it turns out. They're actually more interested in whether or not you're taking good care of somebody than whether or not you're choking yourself at the time while you're doing it. So I don't like to put on suits and ties. If I absolutely have to, I will. A t-shirt's great.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you, and especially I used to work in a company, and where all I would do all day is write, and to an extent, that's what I do today. Still, sure. And quite frankly, why did I have to wear a tie or even a button-down shirt? Nobody saw me. I'm sitting at my computer. Now I'm sitting here, or I'm standing at my desk. Now the question here is, all right, we're going to block you in a minute, my friend. But the question, I am going to respond to this one. How are you going to stop the big techs? And so here's the reality, guys. We are live streaming, and like them or hate them, but it wouldn't be possible without the big tech. We're going to Amazon, we're going to Twitter, we're going to Periscope, YouTube, all at once. Restream and Switcher Studio makes that possible for us. So there you go. I'm going to let Rob talk, mute you in a second over there on Amazon because you're not even on topic. All right, so let's talk about when you pick those trends. I mean, so personally, I saw it. It was hundreds of thousands of views. The TikTok trend of the guy with the song, I don't remember what the song is, but, drinking his cranberry juice. What is it?
Dreams by Fleetwood Mac.
So, and you did that in front of the State House. Of course, some trolls had something bad to say about it, and I thought it was fantastic. So, how do you pick what to do and what to kind of ignore? That one seemed to work.
Well, so I don't know that that might be one of the few times that I've recreated a meme video. I really loved the video that Dogface did, the guy that made it. There's just something about the authenticity in it and the juxtaposition of here's this really tough looking guy with a tattoo on the side of his head, but then he's drinking cranberry juice and singing along with Stevie Nicks from Fleetwood Mac. I mean, it's like he's tough, but he's got a soft side. It's just a really interesting video. And I had seen just one or two other videos copying it. So it was kind of early when it was taking off. But then I had this moment where this was close to the election and early voting had started in Iowa. And as I said earlier, I think for the most part, our politics are very stupid. Our politics are very petty. And our politics are so angry. And I log into social media every day and look at people just screaming at each other and dismissing each other. And I try to temper it. I've defended people from the other party on a regular basis when they're attacked in ways that are really unfair. But I also saw this meme because it's such a feel-good meme, as kind of an opportunity to do that. And then honestly, part of the reason it came together is because it fit into what I was doing. I voted at the county auditor's office. There was a grocery store 2 blocks away. There was a skate shop where I could borrow a skateboard on the way back to the office. And then the Iowa State Capitol is on a hill. So it was really simple. I literally went and bought the cranberry juice, went to the skate shop where I knew the owner, borrowed a board for half an hour, probably did 5 or 6 takes for the video, and that was it. So, which again, I mean, authentic storytelling, there was nothing to that video. It wasn't overly staged. It took me about half an hour to put it together. I put it together because I was in the mood and all the ingredients were right there, rather than really taking a lot of time to manufacture it. And I think that's part of why it did well too. It was fun to do. And I added a hashtag. I put my, I voted today sticker on the cranberry juice. And that was, just the twist for the world that I'm in, for how I responded to that video, which obviously credit to him for doing it in the first place. But we need to do more of that. We need to make, as the hashtag I put on it was, I think, make democracy fun again. Wouldn't that be nice?
Yeah, it was awesome. Certainly, I wouldn't do it. Too dangerous for me. I've been on a skateboard since, I don't know, age 12, and it wasn't pretty then. It probably wouldn't be pretty today. So what's interesting, though, when you mentioned voting in Iowa, and I do have to say this here, guys, all the coverage out there in other states on how difficult it was to vote absentee, I could not relate. I mean, it was voting absentee. I mean, there was some stuff happening, like they couldn't send out one thing or another and they had to send it again, whatever. I still think voting absentee in Iowa is super easy when I see some of the headlines in other states. So I'm glad at least we have that going for us. Yeah. We'll talk about the inland hurricane, Rob. I mean, that's, you came to Cedar Rapids, I believe, with your chainsaw, and you posted pictures, you posted video, and sometimes you stood on top of a house and, did one of those, and, we got some more energy left for the day. What inspired that? What got you thinking to do that? And then, of course, to share the story along the way?
Two things. Number one, I was raised in a house where you go out and you help people when people need help. I think a piece of that is civic mindedness. A piece of that is our faith. My faith is important to me. I think that more important than anyone else, than anything else as a Christian, is to love your neighbors. And if you love your neighbors, then when your neighbors are in need, you should be helping them. So I grew up doing that. That makes it a little bit easier for me. But anyone else out there that's watching this, they can decide to be a person or to make a house where that happens, where you go out and you help people. It's one of the most rewarding feelings you can have in life, is knowing that you have been useful to someone else, I think. And when you take an opportunity to make yourself useful, you can feel not just good about the world, but and good about the people you help, and good about yourself too, because you've done something positive for someone else. So that was a big piece of that to me, was just getting out there and doing the kinds of things that I grew up doing, and putting them on social media is, I think, just in a way to encourage other people to do it. If you remember, during the derecho, which it was an inland hurricane, that is what really happened. Communications throughout the city of Cedar Rapids were down. And I went to other places too. I went to Huxley. I went to Marshalltown. But in Cedar Rapids, it was very hard to know what was going on. And so actually, by being there, I slept in the back of my truck, I've got a camping setup for it, but I brought 2 chainsaws. I slept in the back of the truck. And by being there and letting people know, hey, this house at this property needs help, that house at that property needs help, I know that not only was I using that whatever size Twitter following I have to encourage other people to join me, but I was also giving them literally instructions on where to go and what they could be doing. And you know what? People came out. They did. I had a crew the last day of people who saw me doing it on Twitter and said, hey, can I come too? And I said, absolutely, meet me here. So it was fun, and it was there.
And certainly, anytime anybody can use social media for good, the better. I mean, it's certainly being used for plenty things as well. And the person over here on Amazon, I have muted you in the meantime, but all the questions about banning people from social media, here's the reality of things, and this is all I'm going to say about it, is anybody who incites any kind of violence should be banned from any social media. The end, period. And certainly you did some good things. Now, I remember there was some media, I don't remember who it was, and I don't think they actually wrote about you, but they wrote about some other politicians, and they said, well, they're just, it's really just a campaign for troops or whatever. But I mean, did you get that feedback at all and just kind of brush it off, or did that not come up in your?
It's funny because if you're so I want to do 2 things. I want to kind of respond to whoever it is chirping at Amazon. I can't see whatever chats or questions that are popping up, but since you mentioned that one, I'll say it. Look, in the long run, deplatforming people is not the answer. That we have to have a world where social media has some integrity and ability, right? We ought to require that every account is actually linked to a person the same way the bank account is. It's not like this is a world where you can't do that. Banks do it day in and day out. So you ought to be able to know that that account is a person as opposed to some kind of a robot. There's fixes that we can do that would make social media a much more honest and hospitable place, that are not particularly complicated, but that would reduce the returns of social media companies. Well, okay, sorry, I care about democracy more than I care about those social media companies' extremely high profits. We need to have a good, healthy, functioning democracy. And to have that, we need to not have people beating each other and killing each other. And we also need to have truth. To go back to now, Christoph, what was your question?
That's always a good question. Well, I got plenty of questions, but the one in this case was some politicians were taken
yeah.
a little bit, and was it just a campaign initiative, or were they really? I mean, they were being helpful no matter what, right? Even if it was
no matter what. So I'm a member I'm a Truman Scholar, and there's the Truman Scholar community. It's a really wonderful group of people. It's a scholarship given to college juniors. And the idea is you're sort of through a very rigorous process. They're picking people that they really think genuinely want to make a difference, genuinely care about the public and public issues. There are conversations that happen in that community about every once in a while. The committee might make a mistake and they find someone who ends up winning that maybe is more oriented towards themselves. And there's a debate in the community about whether or not that's okay. If you're doing something good for somebody else, you're doing something good for somebody else. I can't, and you're right. That article wasn't about me. It was about the two women running to represent the 1st District in Congress, which includes Cedar Rapids, and talking about them. It wasn't a campaign year for me, so it was focusing on them. At the end of the day, the two of them know whether or not they would be there, if not for running for office. And I guess at the end of the day, I would rather somebody show up and do something positive than not. So even if they happen to be someone that might not be there otherwise, I'm glad they're there now. I mean, you never need an excuse to go do something helpful for someone else.
Well, and I mean, most of them, from what I can gather, I mean, even if they just helped for a little bit, I mean, they were still helping. It's not like I don't know if you've seen that Instagram account, the influencers in the wild, and they have, it's basically the influencers running on the beach for 5 steps, and you can see them take a video of them running on the beach, and they only ran for 5 steps. It wasn't like that, but anyway, I get it all the time. I see it all the time. The second you become public, the second you share things, there's always people who have something negative to say, who have something.
So much negativity. And, honestly, like, imagine a world where candidates didn't go help people. Even if they're there for 2 hours, they're there to help foster a culture. Ultimately, they might be trying to serve themselves if that's what's in their heart, but they are there still, even if inadvertently, fostering a culture where people are expected to go help each other. I want us to have a culture where people are expected to go help each other. I want us to have a culture where people expect that from elected officials. Now, we should have conversations about how much time someone's spending doing it. How big of an impact they're having. That's good. But I would still, at the end of the day, if the choice is between them doing nothing versus them showing up for a photo op, I guess at the end of the day, someone might see a photo op and say, hey, maybe I should get up off the couch and go do something. And if that's what happens, good.
Yeah, absolutely. Very, very, very true. The other thing, I do remember, I don't remember who it was. I kind of vaguely remember who it was, but, some people were saying, oh, it's so hard to figure out who needed help or whatever. And you literally, I mean, everybody needed help, right? Like everybody, like my street wasn't even in that bad of a shape. And there was people here. I mean, the neighbors, whatever you call it, a tree was on their roof.
Yeah.
Another person, a tree was on their car. Yeah. So everybody needed help. And basically you just stepped out and went to the first place that you ran into, right?
Yeah. I drove around to try to find someone who could direct me, and ended up talking to a guy outside of a building who he had a vest on, like a reflective vest, and so I was like, that guy must know something. And he didn't necessarily know much about relief efforts, but he did know that his neighborhood needed generators, and I had brought 2 generators with me. And so I said, well, what's your address? And I went over there and dropped off the generators at his wife's house. Small world. He was actually from near the same town, near Decorah, my hometown, and was a relative of a guy I had graduated from high school. But then after that, it really was a question of just sort of driving around and finding a project that, with my level of chainsaw skills, I could tackle. And in one case, as you mentioned, actually a good confidence builder for me, I was actually able to take an extremely large tree and get it entirely off of a house without damaging the house. So I worked on that with a friend of mine, Megan. Hi, Megan, if you're listening, who's a native of Northwest Iowa, but now lives in Madison, Wisconsin. She had come down from Madison to help out for the day. So it was fun to work with her for the day. But, just it was a question of driving around and saying, what can I do? What kind of help can I provide? And who needs that kind of help? The really wonderful thing, too, was you didn't have to have chainsaw skills. At one point, we ended up working in front of in a street right on a corner. And one of the guys that lived on the corner was actually a small gas engines and chainsaw expert. And he just lived there. And so there were 4 or 5 of us there. And he, while we were cutting, would do a little bit of maintenance and sharpen the chains on our saws. Other people came out and brought out hot food and cold beverages. And that was fantastic. Because after you're working all day, sawing things up, it is really nice to have something cool to drink. So even though people don't necessarily, it's all a lot of people doing what they can do. And you take the small thing that you can do, and if you put enough people in there doing all of those things, it really can add up to making a big difference.
Yeah, very interesting. And how about, so you're very active on Twitter, maybe not quite as active on Facebook. I didn't even find you on LinkedIn. Looked like an older account. Maybe I just didn't look correctly. But go ahead.
No, I'm not too active on LinkedIn.
And that's okay.
I've seen a joke before about all the ways you're supposed to reach out to me and contact me. And number 9 is crawl through my bedroom window at night. And then number 10 is LinkedIn.
Well, we are live on LinkedIn, guys. So if you're watching there, don't take offense to it because there's much more important things to take offense to. Honestly.
I like the format for Twitter. Honestly, the UX, the user interface on the Facebook app is less interesting. It only shows me my own content and what I have said and then what people have replied to it. And it doesn't show it in a way that's as easy to respond to. So I'm on Facebook. It's as much me on my Facebook account as it is actually me on my Twitter account. It's just a little bit less active because the interface is not quite as easy to use.
Yeah. And so you mentioned, you can tell me if I am, to have people, actual people connected to their Twitter account, right? So when you talk to me, it's you. And it's so funny. So I played football at the University of Iowa, late 90s, that's how old I am again. But, and every once in a while, I hop into a chat on Twitter where people are ripping somebody apart over something Hawkeye related. Yeah. And they know who I am, right? Even though I wasn't I didn't play that much, but again, they know my name. It's a memorable name, I guess. And they respond to me and they're being ridiculous, but their name is Kirk's AirPods. But I don't know who they are. They're just Kirk's AirPods. So I just write back something like, why don't you get back in Kirk's ears if that's how it is. But I don't know. It is frustrating. I mean, is that ever, how do you deal with those people when you don't know who they are?
It varies. And I have days where I deal with them better and I have days where I don't deal with them quite as artfully. Let me answer a piece of that because I think it's an easy way to talk about it, an easy way to answer your question. I follow back almost everybody that I'm for. And it's easy to say, oh, that's a great thing to do politically. I'm not sure that it is, because some people think that it's some people think you're cooler if you get followed by a lot of people but don't follow very many. But to me, what that is if I've looked at your profile for 1 second and realized you're a real person, why would I not follow you back? Like, you're a human being. We are all people inhabiting here, the same state, the same country, the same world. And at the end of the day, I'm interested in people. I care about what people think. And so by following everybody, I can get a very broad swath of thoughts and input from people. And maybe there's someone that I've actually had people tweet happily that they get audited by someone who has a blue, or not audited, followed by someone who has a blue check mark, or they get followed by someone who holds elected office, that it means something to them. And if I can click a button on a website called twitter.com and make somebody happy that I followed them, why would I not do that? Why would I not try to spread that happiness to someone? And it's the same thing with trolls. I mean, like, at the end of the day, every troll is someone that, you know, at some point has been picked on in their life, that someone has been made fun of. A lot of them are people who have been picked on or made fun of repeatedly. I think there's a lot of harm and hurt from where that comes from. As the saying goes, hurt people hurt people. And sometimes they can annoy me or get in my head, but most often I try to treat them with kindness, because I know that behind those words is a person typing them.
Yeah. Sometimes they just need a hug, but currently we don't give any hugs because of COVID.
We don't have a virtual hug website yet.
We'll give you a virtual hug. Rob, it was fantastic to have you on the show. Hopefully others took some inspiration from the stories you shared, and share fun things on social. I think those little videos are fun. Answering people's questions are fun. And certainly we can always learn from each other. And, again, I do agree. Use your real name. Don't be Kirk's AirPods. If you're not in Iowa, Kirk is Kirk Ferentz, the Iowa football coach. He's been there 22 years or something like that. Longest serving coach. I don't know, maybe everywhere. But Rob, hopefully people connect with you, and certainly I know you'll follow them back. Appreciate you making the time for today's episode.
Yeah, I'm glad to do it. Thanks for having me.
You bet. Thanks.